Chapter 1. The Light in the Desert. The first thing Margaret noticed was the color of the sky. It had gone from the dry blue of Nevada noon to a metallic sheen that made the desert look as if it were wrapped in foil. Heat shimmered off the Tulane and turned distant sagebrush into mirages. Elias drove with both hands on the wheel, and his jaw set in that way she used to tease him about storm face, she called it, the look that meant he was choosing a hill to die on. They'd left before dawn, telling no one where they were going because neither of them knew. After 22 years, they had gotten good at moving forward even when the map was blank. The radio had long since fallen to static. The AC pushed air that smelled faintly of dust and hot plastic. It happened at 3:17 p.m. The dashboard clock had a cracked 7-segment digit. It could be mistaken for 8. But she glanced up when the light broke. A streak carved itself across the western sky, brighter than a meteor and wrong in its angle, a wound in the heavens that smoked and spat. For a second, the world looked like a photograph, overexposed in the middle. A white smear, a tone burned out of the spectrum. The ground trembled. A heartbeat later, a sound like a city tearing was carried to them on the dry wind. "Did you?" Elias began. "I saw," Margaret said too quickly. He lifted his foot from the gas. The sedan wobbled as if unsure of its duty without speed. "Keep driving," she said. "Call 911. Let someone with a badge handle it. Out here," he nodded at the emptiness, "we might be the only people who saw where it fell. We don't know what it is. It could be a plane. It could be, I don't know, it could be a missile. Or it could be something that needs help. You don't even know if it's safe." Elias pressed the brake. The car coasted to the shoulder and rocked to a stop. The heat outside pressed against the windows like a living thing. He looked at the line of smoke on the horizon, then at the ring he no longer wore, tan line of a marriage. "Stay in the car," he said, already opening the door. "Elias, lock it. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, go. Find a trooper." "Don't be a fool," she said. But he was already out, slamming the door with a thud that made the rearview mirror vibrate. Chapter 2. The Return. She watched him step over the low wire fence and walk into the desert. His figure shrank quickly, became a stickman cutout crossing beige paper, then a dot swallowed by the contour of a wash. The smoke blush on the horizon deepened. The sky stilled into that awful metallic, as if the desert were a circuit board and something had shorted. Minutes were elastic. She locked the doors and then unlocked them, angry at herself, then locked them again. She hated that he had said stay in the car. She hated that she would obey. She drank the last of a warm water bottle and let herself think stupid thoughts. Was this how a new life began? Not a grand decision, but a moment of waiting, one person stepping out and the other staying behind. Time passed without sound. She drifted into a sleep that was not sleep, dreamless and staccato. When she opened her eyes, the sun had slouched lower. Her phone showed no bars. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, angry at the dampness there. Then the passenger door opened, and Elias slid in, moving with the delicate care of a man holding something in his mind, like water to the brim. "What did you?" she began, but his eyes shut her mouth. They were clear and unreadable, like a river stone. He buckled, started the car, and pulled back onto the road. No dust on his clothes, no ash, no blood, nothing to show the desert had touched him. "What did you see?" she asked again, softer. "Is anyone hurt?" He didn't answer. He looked at the road, and the road opened before him. Chapter 3: The Drive East. She told herself his silence was shock. She told herself 100 stories about the next 15 minutes, each one ending with him speaking, smiling in that tired, embarrassed way he had when he knew he'd gone too far and come back. When they reached the interchange, he should have taken the ramp toward Las Vegas. Instead, he stayed on the main line. "You missed the exit," she said. "Did I?" he said, like a man repeating a foreign phrase. "Where are you going?" He kept driving. The horizon rearranged itself in the windshield. The desert made no complaint. "Elias," she said his name like a password. "Where are you going?" "Washington." His voice was level. "Washington State." "DC." She laughed then, because she couldn't not. The sound surprised them both. It filled the car and then died in embarrassment. "Why?" He didn't answer. She would have pressed him more. But there was something wrong at the next gas station. A man in a denim shirt came out from the shadowed bay with a receipt book and a paper cup of peanuts. He saw Elias, and his face emptied by degrees, like someone gently turning down the brightness on a screen. He nodded, not to Margaret, not to both of them, but to Elias alone. "How far to the next town?" Elias asked. 140 some miles, the man said. "Road stays straight. Watch for coyotes after dark." His voice was too calm, the kind of calm you use with men who can end you on a whim. Elias paid in cash. The attendant's hand hovered under his, respectful but not fearful, like the hand of a junior officer receiving a coin from a king. When Elias handed back the pen, the man flinched, and then smiled as if someone had told him in his ear that smiling was correct. Chapter 4: The Hush Around Him. Back in the car, Margaret steadied her voice. "Do you know that man?" "No," Elias said. "What did you do to him?" He blinked. For a second, there was a glitch in him, a blank spot. Nothing. They drove east. They ate cheap food in bright places. At every stop, the same thing. A hush around Elias like the air going out of a room. People deferred with instinctive choreography. The more she noticed it, the worse it got. It felt like a trick played on animals, a dog whistle pitched too high to explain to anyone who had never heard it. Somewhere in Nebraska, she tried to pray. The words collapsed. She had been a woman of community college biology lectures and school bake sales. She had not been asked for big words in years. The smallest ones felt most false. On the third night, not sleeping, she turned in her seat to watch him drive. His profile in the glow of the instrument panel looked like Elias' face had always looked, except for that stillness. It was not peace. It was empty room with door shut. "Do you love me?" she asked. "Yes," he said, without inflection. She waited for more. None came. She looked at the window and saw herself reflected, her hair pulled back, her mouth set. She looked like her mother, the night before her father left. Chapter 5: The Arrival. They reached Washington in a soft rain. Clouds hung low and gray as lint. Motorcades yowled somewhere in the distance, lost in the city's arteries. Elias drove as if he had rehearsed the streets in a dream. A string of turns, a tunnel of trees, the sudden white of mansion. "You can't just," Margaret began, but he could. The first barrier gave them warnings, the choreography of threat. A guard approached, hand flat, 2 fingers hooked on a radio. He began to speak, and then his face changed. This was the part that would stick with Margaret for years. The tiny flicker of "oh" that wasn't fear, not exactly, but a recognition. "You belong here, and I am late in realizing it." "Sir," the guard said, "proceed." They were let through 2 more perimeters, with that same soft failure of procedure. The men at each gate were efficient, precise, careful, professional in that uniquely American way. They were also, one by one, overcome by the conviction that this man must pass. Margaret muttered, "They will kill you," because it felt like a spell that needed saying. But no bullets came. The car rolled forward across wet pavement into a courtyard of controlled light. Then it was corridors, bright floors, hushed people whose name tags flashed by too fast to read. A woman with a tablet fell in beside them. "This way," she said, and led them through a set of double doors into a room Margaret knew from television and Christmas ornaments. The Oval Office looked smaller than she expected, strangely domestic. A carpet with an eagle, flags, a painting of a storm at sea. The president stood as they entered. He looked surprised, then alert, then surprised again, as if his mind were receiving 2 feeds at once. "Who are you?" he asked. Chapter 6: The Warning. Elias didn't answer directly. He stepped forward, and for a moment, Margaret felt an absurd impulse to pull him back by the elbow and whisper, "Be polite," into his ear. "A message has arrived," Elias said. His voice carried without volume. It made the document frames hum. "From beyond our skis, your work in Geneva is about to open a door. You believe it leads to particles. It leads to a mouth. If you open it wrong, the world ends." The president took this in, as if receiving bad lab results in a doctor's office. "How do you know?" "I was told," Elias said. "By whom?" "Messengers." The room, a machine made of people, shifted into question and answer mode. The president asked what must have been the right questions. because the people who entered then were not press secretaries, but men and women with knives in their eyes. They didn't point a single gun, and still the room felt like the barrel of one. Elias was not interrogated. He was listened to. Margaret watched the way the National Security Advisor lifted her chin, the set of the general's mouth. She had lived around men like this, school board chairs, principals who ran their buildings with quiet competence. She had never seen them so careful with one man's words. Chapter 7, The Mission. In the middle of an answer, Margaret realized she was crying. Not big, messy tears, small ones that tickled and made her angry. She pressed her nails into her palms. She stood very straight. "Can you stop it?" the president asked finally. "Not we, not our teams, but you," as if a correction had already begun. "Yes," Elias said. "Then we'll go." They went. The moving of powerful people always looks like an accident, like something that cannot possibly be planned, until you realize it is simply practice. They were lifted into a sky that shuddered with the weight of engines. A line of jets, like punctuation marks, moved through the cloud cover and broke over the Atlantic. Margaret sat a row behind her husband and watched the back of his head and wished the plane would turn around. At Geneva, they were received like a rumor. The Collider campus sat on its acres like a sleeping god, power lines, cooling towers, tunnels bored into the ground like the roots of some machine tree. Scientists arrived in small flocks, murmuring in half a dozen languages. They saw the president like a block of gravity passing through their circles, their questions drawing into elliptical orbits. And then there was Elias, who did not belong and therefore belonged more than anyone. He walked into a room full of physicists and engineers, men and women who had grown old with equations, and he spoke in paragraphs that landed not on their ears, but behind them. Chapter 8, The Collider. Margaret did not understand what he said, but she saw understanding happen, like grass flattening in the wake of a wind that did not blow. "No," a gray-bearded physicist said at first, holding a page like a shield. "That's absurd. That violates." Then his voice slowed. He stared at Elias with a child's focus, all the other men in him, the committees and the caution, falling away. "Yes, of course. If the cross-section is, if we shift the, but why would we?" "Because you have been signaling," Elias said. "Every time you turned the ring on, you knocked on a door. The door knocks back." The physicist's eyes filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. He laughed, then put a hand to his mouth to stop it. There were 3 weeks, then 4, measured in arrays of numbers, and the movement of cranes. The collider was changed, not visibly. At first, the changes lived in code and tolerances, settings altered in quiet rooms. Margaret walked a campus of cafeterias and whiteboards and found herself holding 2 cups of coffee she did not remember ordering. The weather had the smell of rain even when it did not rain. The mountains turned blue in the afternoons, like bruises. The president came and went, World leaders flickered on screens. Some nights, the news crawls showed rumors that leaked and were quashed. There were protests at the perimeter, men with signs, women with bullhorns, a clear-voiced girl who sang into the camera. Don't cut the sky. Don't cut the sky. Chapter 9. The End and the Answer. A security officer took Margaret aside on the 10th day and asked if she needed anything. He was polite in a way that presumed a hierarchy she did not feel part of. He called her ma'am so gently it sounded like sorry. Are you all right? He asked. She lied, because anything else would have been a collapse that started here and tunneled its way through to the ruins. I'm fine. Your husband is. He trailed off, unable to decide between brilliant and dangerous, between miracle and weapon. He's unusual. Yes, she said. That night, in the small guest room they gave her, she put her hands on either side of the sink and looked at herself in a mirror that had seen 1,000 other faces come and go. She thought, I can leave. She imagined walking out with nothing but the clothes she was wearing and the slip of a passport, leaving this building the way a person sheds a skin. She imagined a train, a hotel with a thin floral bedspread, a name that was not her name at all. She did not go. Sometimes the worst parts of us are not our weaknesses, but our strengths. The faithfulness that keeps you at the table, even after you realize the meal is poison. When Elias slept, he slept like a device on standby, still, mouth parted barely, a flicker in one eyelid like a heartbeat seen under skin. He did not dream openly. He did not snore the way he used to when he came home from double shifts. When she put her hand on his chest, the old familiar warmth was there, but beneath it something else, like a second rhythm she could not count. Who are you? She whispered once. His eyes opened immediately. Elias. And who else? He did not answer, but neither did he pretend not to understand. On the 27th day, the campus stilled. A hush settled over the halls. Even the vending machines felt nervous. The control room looked like the bridge of a ship. Screens on every wall glowed with maps of invisible things. Rows of chairs were filled with people whose lives had led by scholarship, by obsession, by luck, to this very console on this very day. In the observation deck above, politicians and donors and the useful famous murmured, trying to decide whether to be solemn or excited. Margaret stood at the back, near the door. From there, she could see the whole room, the bright human hive, the circle of light on the floor where Elias stood with 2 or 3 senior scientists. He had been given no badge, but carried more authority than anyone who wore one. Final systems checks, someone announced, and the room became a phonograph needle riding a groove. Boxes were ticked. The enormous power of the ring, that city beneath the city, came to heel at a series of keyboard strokes. It felt obscene to Margaret to leash something that big with something that small. The president stood on the deck like a man who had paid for the ship with his blood. He met Margaret's eyes across the room and nodded once. She nodded back, because you nod to kings. Power to beam one, a voice said, confirming stability. Across the room, a young woman's hand hovered over a guarded switch. Her lips moved, not in prayer, but in what looked like the rehearsal of a line. She pressed the switch, and a low vibration moved through the building and through Margaret's body and out into the ground, and she imagined around the world. Beam 1 at nominal, another voice said. Beam 2 in 5. Elias lifted his head. The girl pressed the second switch. The screens bloomed into busy life. Even to a layperson, there are certain kinds of pictures your eyes know. Seismic charts, EKGs, the snowfall of error. The graphs went from neat to frantic in a blink. A noise like thunder underwater filled the room. Alarms spoke. The hair on Margaret's arms rose. What is that? A senator demanded, pointing at a screen where a circle rippled into a black pit, not black at all, but a light that canceled other lights, an absence as active as a flame. That should not be forming, a scientist said. His voice bent toward a laugh and missed. It should, we compensated for. Shut it down, someone barked. Shut it down, repeated 3 others, and the words ricocheted around the room. Smart men and women repeating a thing like a spell that would work if said by enough mouths. Fingers flew, keys pressed. A sequence of failures scrolled down one screen like a litany. The big machine did not listen. People looked at Elias because they could not help it. He was very still. Chapter 10. The Return Through the Gate. Beneath the mountain, where the ring still burned in its dying orbit, something shifted. The light that had devoured light folded in on itself, shrinking to a shape that was almost human. The alarms faded one by one, until only a single tone remained a pulse, steady and patient, like a heart too large for the body that held it. Elias stood before the portal, his outline trembling at the edges, as though reality itself were reconsidering him. The air around him shimmered with heat and language. Margaret's bus was already miles away, but he could still hear her voice, the slap, the plea, the last human syllables that tethered him to the world he'd borrowed. He raised a hand, studying it. The skin was beginning to separate into lines of light. Beneath it was not blood, but memory, streams of what he had been before the desert, before the messenger arrived. A whisper came from the collapsing void. It wasn't sound. It was invitation. You kept your promise, it said. Elias, or what the world had called Elias, smiled. She believed long enough for me to return. That was the bargain. The light pulsed once, acknowledging. He stepped forward, and the world peeled open like a wound healing backward. For a moment, the control room was filled with silhouettes of impossible architecture, vast spires suspended in currents of starlight, oceans of color that existed only where eyes could not see. He crossed the threshold, and the body he wore dissolved, bone, dust, breath, all of it falling away like a discarded shell. What remained was the traveler who had worn him, memories intact, humanity stitched to a consciousness that had never known mortality until now. Behind him, the blackness sealed, leaving no scar. Instruments blinked dead. The collider cooled. The mountain exhaled. Far above, Margaret's bus wound through a pass. She looked out the window and thought she saw, just for an instant, the sky ripple like water touched by a fingertip. She felt warmth on her palm, the echo of his hand, the one that had said, "Remember me." Deep within another sky, the being that had once been Elias stood among its kind, formless watchers, luminous and ancient. They regarded him silently. "It worked," he said. They closed the door. 1,000 voices answered as one. "And you?" He looked toward the faint blue star hanging far below. The memory of Margaret burning there like a candle in an endless night. "I brought home what you sent me for," he said softly. "Their knowing, their love, their fear." The others shimmered, unreadable. "You deceived them." "I saved them," he said. "They would have opened the mouth again. I made them believe the messenger stayed behind." He looked down at his hands, new again, but still bearing the ghost of her touch. "But I left something there, a seed of us, of me." The cosmic expanse brightened. The being turned, and where he walked, stars bent slightly, listening. On a planet far below, a eucalyptus tree stood in the garden of a ruined laboratory. Its leaves faced east, toward a dawn not yet named, and in the whisper of wind between them came a single word, almost human: "Elias."